I've been shot at in the Gulf, crawled under live wiring in a storm, and fixed a turbine engine in the middle of a blackout while the captain was screaming down my neck. None of that prepared me for the moment my sister picked up a microphone at her company's merger gala and turned me into the punchline of her victory speech. She raised her glass in that fake glamorous way she does, smiling at the crowd like she was hosting the Oscars. Then she pointed right at me. "This is my sister Amber, still in the Navy, still fixing boats, still doesn't own a blow dryer." Laughter, not polite chuckles, real ugly laughter from people in expensive suits who'd never held a wrench in their lives. Even my mom laughed. That stung more than the rest combined. I didn't flinch. I didn't sip my champagne. I just looked at Reagan and said loud enough for the first 3 tables to hear, "Cheers. This is the last time any of you will see me." Then I left. No drama, no glass-shattering exit. Just me, heels clicking on marble, walking straight out the door of the Four Seasons ballroom, like I was stepping off a job site. The moment the doors closed behind me, the silence inside that room hit harder than any explosion I've ever heard. And that's when it started. That's when I stopped playing the quiet, useful sister who held things together from the shadows. Because behind every success story my sister sold to investors was a list of people like me, people she stepped on to climb higher. I was one of them, but I was also the one who built the damn ladder. 3 years ago, her company was circling the drain, a bad turbine design, supply chain issues, and an OSHA report that would have sunk anyone else. I was stationed in Yokosuka, living off base, and hadn't spoken to Reagan in months when she called me sobbing. She said she didn't know who else to turn to, that her engineers were useless, that the structural calculations were off, and the offshore wind farm might collapse, and that if she went down, the whole family's name would go with her. I should have said no, but I didn't. Because like an idiot, I still thought blood meant something. So I flew back to Chicago on my own. Dime walked into that disaster of a project and spent 2 weeks doing the work her entire team couldn't. I corrected the pitch angles on the turbines, recalculated the load-bearing supports, and personally redesigned the reinforcement structure using specs I'd learned working on Navy ships. I sent her my final draft. She sent me a thank you text. That was it. No name on the press release. No credit in the investor packet. No mention at the ribbon-cutting ceremony where she smiled next to the governor and talked about innovation and leadership, like she hadn't nearly sunk the whole project 6 months earlier. I swallowed it. I told myself it didn't matter, that my work spoke for itself. But that night at the gala, when she dragged my name across the marble floor in front of 200 strangers and laughed about it, that was the last straw. And if you've ever had your work stolen, your name erased, or your dignity laughed at by people who think a title makes them untouchable, leave a comment below. I read every single one. And while you're at it, hit subscribe. You're going to want to hear how this ends. Back to the story. The air outside hit like ice. I still had my dress on navy blue, fitted, picked out by my mom. Said I should look like less of a soldier, more like a sister. Didn't matter. That dress couldn't make me part of that world. I wasn't one of them. I never was. I walked past the black town cars lined up outside and made my way to the back lot where I'd parked my 10-year-old pickup. Dusty, dented, and filled with gear, the valet didn't even look twice at me. Probably assumed I was part of the crew breaking down the lighting. Inside the cab, I sat for a minute. No tears, just silence. My phone buzzed. A message from Reagan. "Don't be so sensitive." It was a joke. And there it was, the same line I'd heard since we were kids. When she broke my laptop in college, it was a joke. When she called my deployment a taxpayer-funded vacation, it was a joke. When she took my designs and presented them as her own, business is business. But it wasn't business. It was theft. And it was personal. That night, I didn't drive back to my apartment. I drove to my old office. Well, her office now. But I still had the key. The security guard nodded at me like nothing had changed. I went in, found the old filing cabinet in the back, and pulled out the physical copies of the turbine calculations. My name, my notes, my original reinforcement design. She hadn't even changed the font. And taped to the back of one of the pages. A sticky note in my handwriting from 3 years ago. This version is unstable. Do not use. Fails under 70 mpes plus wind shear. Guess which version got built anyway? I took the files. Took a breath, drove home. That's when I knew this wasn't just about a mean joke at a fancy party. It wasn't about pride or credit. It was about the fact that my sister had gambled people's lives to save money and used my name to do it, and I wasn't going to let her get away with that. I didn't turn on the lights when I got home. I dropped my keys on the counter, set the folder on the table, and stood there listening to the low hum of the fridge. That sound felt familiar. Machines always did. People rarely did. I changed out of the dress and into a hoodie, then opened the folder and spread the papers across the table. Clean lines, precise measurements, my handwriting in the margins. I could trace the entire project from memory without looking because I'd lived inside it for weeks, back when no one else wanted to. Reagan liked to tell investors her success came from vision. What she didn't say was that her vision showed up after someone else fixed the math. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the old project drive I still had access to. She'd never bothered changing the credentials. Probably didn't think the Navy mechanic would know what to do with them. The files were all there. Early drafts, my revisions, my warnings. Then the final version, the one that went to the city for approval. Same diagrams, same structure, different name on the cover page. Hers. That's when I stopped feeling angry and started feeling alert. Anger burns fast and stupid. Alert keeps you alive. People love to say the military makes you rigid. What it actually does is teach you how to see patterns and ignore noise. You learn which alarms matter and which ones are just people panicking because they don't understand the system. This mattered. I leaned back in the chair and thought about how this all started. Not the gala, not the merger, way earlier. Growing up, Reagan was the one who talked. I was the one who fixed things. When the garage door jammed, I got called. When the router went down, I got called. When Reagan's science project needed wiring, I got called. Then she stood in front of the class and got the grade. That pattern never changed. It just got more expensive. When I joined the Navy, she told people I was figuring myself out. When I made Petty Officer First Class, she said I was still enlisted. When I turned down a civilian offer with a 6-figure salary, she told our parents I was scared of real responsibility. The truth was simpler. I liked knowing that when something failed under pressure, I could fix it. I liked being accountable. I liked systems that didn't care about charm. Reagan built her career on charm. That night, sitting at my kitchen table, I opened the maintenance reports from the offshore site. Public records. Anyone could access them if they knew where to look. I did. The numbers were off. Not catastrophic yet, but trending wrong. Stress fractures in non-critical components. Repairs logged as routine when they weren't. A turbine yaw adjustment noted as within tolerance that absolutely wasn't. Someone was smoothing the data. I zoomed in on the approval stamps. Engineering sign-offs, compliance reviews. And then I saw it. My name. Not typed, not referenced, scanned. My professional engineering signature, copied, dropped, and resized just enough to pass a quick glance. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because I was surprised, because I was disappointed. There's a difference. If that turbine failed during a storm, the investigation would lead straight to me. My license, my record, my career. Everything I'd built without her. That's when my phone buzzed again. A text from my mom. Reagan says you embarrassed her tonight. You should apologize. I set the phone face down. This wasn't about embarrassment. This was about leverage. People like Reagan don't panic when they lose control. They panic when the person they thought was harmless stops cooperating. I packed the folder back up and drove across town to the base. Not my current assignment, just a quiet admin building where I knew the security detail and the cameras worked. I signed into a terminal and ran a comparison between the approved design and my archived draft. The differences weren't obvious to a layperson. That was the point. The steel thickness reduced here. A tolerance widened there. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to shave millions off the budget. Just enough to look good on a balance sheet. Just enough to fail when conditions turned ugly. I saved everything to an encrypted drive and locked it in my locker. Then I sat there for a minute, staring at the concrete wall, thinking about all the times I'd covered for her without realizing it. I remembered the night she called me years ago, asking how to word an email to her board. I remembered rewriting her explanation, so it sounded competent. I remembered explaining stress loads over dinner while she nodded and pretended to understand. She didn't need to understand. She needed to sell, and I'd let her. That was on me. When I got back to my truck, the city was quiet. No gala lights, no applause, just street lamps and empty lanes. I didn't feel small anymore. I felt clear. This wasn't about proving anything to her, or to my parents, or to the people who laughed. This was about stopping a bad system before it hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Reagan thought she'd built something impressive, something permanent. She thought the person who actually understood how it worked would stay invisible forever. She was wrong. And for the first time since I left that ballroom, I smiled. The phone kept buzzing in my cup holder as I drove, and I let it. I knew who it was before I looked. When I finally pulled over, I didn't answer. I opened the messages. Mom first, then Dad, then Reagan again. Reagan's was short. "You're being dramatic. Come talk like an adult." That line always came right before she tried to corner me. I drove to my parents' house anyway, not because I wanted a fight, because I wanted to say something out loud that I'd only ever said in my head. My dad answered the door. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. Not weaker, just tired. He stepped aside without a word, like he already knew this wasn't going to be a quick visit. Mom was in the kitchen. Reagan was at the dining table, scrolling her phone like this was a minor inconvenience on her calendar. She didn't stand up. "You embarrassed me," she said, not looking up. "In front of investors." I stayed standing. "You embarrassed yourself," I said. "I just stopped helping you hide it." Mom jumped in immediately. She always did. "Amber, you didn't have to say anything. You could have laughed it off." That hit harder than the gala. "I didn't laugh," I said. "I left." Reagan finally looked up. Her smile was tight. "You always do this. You make things uncomfortable. You don't understand how this world works." I nodded once. "I understand exactly how it works. That's the problem." Dad cleared his throat. He looked at Reagan. "Is there something you want to tell us?" She leaned back in her chair. Confident, comfortable. "There's nothing to tell. She helped a little years ago." I thanked her. That's it. I reached into my jacket and set the folder on the table. It landed flat, solid, loud enough. Reagan didn't touch it. "I don't need to see whatever this is." "You should," I said, "because my name is on your current permits." That did it. She froze. Just for a second. Long enough for me to know I wasn't wrong. Mom frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "that if something goes wrong with her offshore turbines, the investigation leads to me. Not her." Reagan stood up fast. "That's not true." I opened the folder to the stamped page and slid it across the table. Dad leaned in. Mom covered her mouth. Reagan's voice sharpened. "You're overreacting. It's a standard sign-off. I didn't sign it." Silence. The kind that makes people uncomfortable because it doesn't come with instructions. Mom looked at Reagan. "Did you use her name?" Reagan didn't answer right away. When she did, her tone was annoyed, not apologetic. "It's complicated. The engineers were behind. The deadline was tight." Dad straightened. "You forged her approval." I didn't forge anything, Reagan snapped. My team handled the paperwork. That's forging, I said. That's also a felony, she laughed. A short, sharp sound. Don't be ridiculous. Nothing's going to happen. These systems pass inspection all the time. They pass because people like me make sure they do, I said. Not because you rushed them through. Mom stepped closer to me. Amber, please. Think about what you're doing. This affects all of us. There it was. The real line. The one that always mattered more than the truth. Exactly, I said. It affects all of us. And you're asking me to take the fall for her. Reagan crossed her arms. You're not taking a fall. You're just being part of the family. I stared at her. You don't get to call it family when it only works one direction. Dad sat down slowly. He looked at his hands. She saved the company, he said almost to himself. No, I said. I did. And I didn't ask for credit. I asked not to be used. Mom shook her head. You're blowing this out of proportion. Reagan worked hard for this. I worked hard too, I said. I just didn't bring a microphone. Reagan leaned forward. So what do you want? An apology, a plaque. I want my name off your permits, I said. And I want the design corrected. She smiled again. This time it was colder. That would delay the merger. Yes, I said. It would. Mom looked between us. Amber, don't do this. I picked up the folder. I didn't start this. Reagan's voice dropped. If you push this, you'll ruin everything. I met her eyes. No. I'll expose what you already ruined. Dad stood up. Amber, he said quietly, is there another way I wanted to say yes? I wanted to say I could fix it quietly, like always. Rewrite the numbers, adjust the margins, clean up the mess. I didn't? No, I said. There isn't. Reagan scoffed. You think anyone's going to listen to you over me? I paused at the door. They already are. You just don't know it yet. Outside, the air felt lighter. Not because anything was resolved, because something was finally decided. I got in my truck and started the engine. Family loyalty only works when it doesn't ask you to lie, cheat, or disappear. And the moment it does, it stops being loyalty and starts being leverage. I drove away knowing one thing for sure. I wasn't going to carry this alone anymore. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour print shop just outside the Loop. The kind that caters to late-night law students and mid-level managers trying to impress someone with a deck full of stolen slides. I knew the manager, retired Army, used to run logistics in Kandahar. He let me use the back computer without asking questions. I loaded my drive. The screen blinked to life with the blueprint files. Draft 5 My version. Finalized specs. Redundant supports. Emergency shutoff redundancies. All signed, dated, archived. Draft 4. The one Reagan's firm submitted to the city. Less steel. Fewer supports. Missing key failsafes I'd flagged 6 times in writing. Both looked nearly identical unless you knew what you were looking for. But I knew. Every single corner they cut was calculated to save money. And I had proof they knew the risk. It was all right there in the metadata. Time-stamped edits, version history, my original notes. A side-by-side comparison showed that not only had they submitted an older flawed draft, they had reinserted my name and engineering stamp as if I had reapproved it. That wasn't a mistake. That was strategy. I printed everything, full scale. 3 sets, bound and labeled, 1 for me, 1 for legal, 1 for insurance. Because this wasn't just professional theft anymore. It was structural fraud, and it could kill someone. When I left, the streets were starting to light up with early traffic. Morning joggers, delivery vans. People who had no idea the wind turbines powering parts of the city were held up by math my sister ignored. I stopped for black coffee and sat in the truck scrolling through city permits again, looking for names, anything I'd missed. That's when I saw it. Under Engineer of Record, my license number was listed next to a different project name, one I'd never worked on. I clicked it. Same story, same stamp, same design style. Another recycled draft pushed through with my name on it. Now it wasn't just one project. It was two, maybe more. I opened LinkedIn. Reagan had posted a photo from the gala, her standing in front of a massive display of the new turbine model. Caption, "Vision meets precision. Proud to lead the team behind Chicago's clean energy future." Funny, I wasn't in the picture. I had been in the original shot, standing off to the left. But in this version, I'd been cropped out completely. I sat there for a long moment, coffee going cold in my hand. That wasn't just erasure, that was preparation. They weren't just stealing my work. They were systematically removing me from the narrative, so that when things went south, there'd be no public memory of my role, just legal documentation tying me to liability. They wanted to disappear me on paper and leave me holding the bag if the steel cracked or the wind load failed. They'd already written the story where I was the screw-up, the disgruntled sister, the Navy mechanic who just didn't understand how business worked. But they made one mistake. They used a draft I specifically warned them not to touch. In writing, with a note that said in all caps, "Do not use this version, fails under storm pressure." I'd saved the PDF of that original email. It was time-stamped and sent to Reagan's direct inbox 3 years ago. That message was now a legal tripwire. I emailed a copy to myself. Then I encrypted the folder, backed it up, and made a second copy on a physical drive that I stuck in my glove compartment under a pack of gum and a flashlight. At 9:04 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up. Amber Whitaker, the voice said. Male, cautious, young. Yes. This is Miller, from the South Harbor site. We've met. I'm the new foreman. I recognized the name. Good guy, old school. Used to work under the last site manager before Reagan replaced him with someone cheaper. I've got something you need to see, he said. But I don't want to send it electronically. What is it? A termination notice, he said. For my crew, all of them, every name you trained. I felt my pulse rise. She's cleaning house, I said. She's using your name to do it, he said. The notice says you approved the dismissals based on non-compliance with federal safety directives. I laughed, short, bitter. I've been active duty for the past 12 months, I said. I haven't even been on that site. I know. That's why I called. I thought you'd want to see it in writing. I do. We agreed to meet that afternoon. I hung up and stared at the screen. They weren't just trying to erase me. They were framing me on paper, in policy, and in public record. And here's the thing about getting pushed too far. At some point, you stop thinking like a fixer and start thinking like a soldier. They had declared war on the wrong damn person. Miller handed me the envelope like it was evidence in a trial, and honestly, it was. We met in the parking lot of a supply depot just south of the city where no one from corporate would ever show their face. He didn't bother with small talk, just popped open the passenger door of his truck, pulled out the manila envelope, and handed it to me without a word. Inside were 6 termination letters, all dated 2 days after the gala, all bearing my name as the recommending officer for dismissal. The headers were printed with Reagan's company logo. The signatures were digital, but formatted to match mine. They really used your military title too, he said, nodding toward one of the letters. Look at the line right above the signature block. I looked. Recommended by Petty Officer First Class Amber Whitaker, U.S. Navy Engineering Consultant. My hands clenched before I could stop them. This is beyond sloppy, I muttered. It's desperate. I figured Miller said, watching me. That's why I didn't go to HR. Good, I said. They'd bury it. He nodded. They've already started clearing out tool lockers. My guys are pissed, but they're also scared. You trained half that crew yourself. Everyone knows this isn't your call, but nobody wants to get blacklisted. I believed him. In this industry, reputation was currency. If Reagan's people were willing to fake my signature and attach my name to layoffs, they were probably telling investors I'd quietly signed off on all kinds of things. I slid the letters back into the envelope. They're trying to build a paper trail, make it look like I've been part of every shady decision from day one. Miller hesitated. Then he leaned a little closer. There's someone inside who might help you. I looked up. She's junior, works in document control. Name's Tessa, keeps backups of everything, even when they say not to. You didn't hear that from me? I never heard your name, I said. He gave me a dry smile and walked back to his truck. By the time I got home, I had a plan. Not a perfect one, but something that resembled a start. I couldn't storm the building or launch a lawsuit with a handful of forged PDFs. I needed a link proof from the inside that Reagan's team had not only stolen my work, but falsified legal documents to bury the evidence. Tessa, document control. Probably 2 years out of college, still figuring out where she stood in the hierarchy, still idealistic enough to believe in accountability, or at least disillusioned enough to help someone who hadn't forgotten what ethics looked like. I didn't call. I showed up. I walked into the corporate lobby like I belonged there because once upon a time, I did. The receptionist wasn't the same, which worked in my favor. I signed in with an old ID badge I never returned and took the elevator to the second floor. Document control was buried in the back near the supply room. Cheap carpeting, bad lighting. Tessa sat at a desk with 2 monitors and 3 empty Red Bull cans. She looked up as I approached, suspicious at first. Then her expression changed when she saw my name tag. "Oh," she said. "You're the sister." I raised an eyebrow. "Depends which version of that story you've heard." She gave a cautious smile. "The real one, I think." I pulled the envelope from my bag and set it on her desk. They used my name to fire people and to sign off on unsafe systems. I need backup documentation. She leaned back in her chair. "You're not recording this, right?" "No. I'll lose my job if they find out." "They'll lose more than that if this goes public," I said. That made her pause. She looked around, then opened her bottom drawer and pulled out a portable hard drive. "I shouldn't have this," she said, "but I mirror the server every Friday. Company protocol is to delete everything over 30 days old, but I keep full backups. Don't ask why." "I'm not asking," I said. She plugged in the drive and started copying files. I watched the folder names scroll by: draft archives, internal revisions, legal approvals, investor presentations. "Do you know if they ever corrected draft 4? I asked. She shook her head. "No. In fact, I flagged it once when I saw it resubmitted under a new code. They said it was a placeholder. Legal signed off. Under my name." She stopped typing. "Oh my God." "Yeah," I said. "That's why I'm here." The drive finished transferring. She ejected it and handed it to me like it was radioactive. "I don't want to know what you're going to do with this," she said. "But good luck." "Thank you," I said. I left the building without incident, drove 10 blocks, and pulled into a gas station parking lot. I plugged the drive into my laptop and scanned the folders. Everything was there. Internal emails where Reagan's team discussed reusing the more budget-friendly draft to hit Q4 margins. Memos from legal suggesting Amber won't object as long as optics are managed. Meeting minutes that outright stated the design had been backdated with legacy approval. It wasn't just unethical, it was deliberate. They'd weaponized my silence, turned my trust into a shield for corporate fraud. And now they were hoping I'd stay quiet long enough for the ink to dry on the merger. That wasn't going to happen. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I spent hours sitting at my kitchen table, going through the hard drive line by line, document by document. My apartment was quiet except for the low whine of my laptop's fan and the occasional creak from the pipes in the wall. Every file I opened confirmed what I already knew. But seeing it laid out, this clearly was something else. They'd built their entire success on my work, and then turned me into the legal scapegoat. It wasn't just a bad business decision. It was calculated professional sabotage. And the longer I waited, the more time they had to finalize the merger, bury the files, and make the lies permanent. So I made a decision. I didn't want revenge. I wanted accuracy, accountability. I wanted the record to reflect reality. And if that meant nuking their little fantasy from orbit, then so be it. The next morning, I sent 3 emails. The first went to my legal contact at a military engineering oversight committee. I kept it simple, attached the documents flagged the forged approval, and requested a review of any civilian projects that had been tied to my license. The second went to an insurance compliance officer I'd met during a turbine inspection 2 years ago. His specialty was liability assessment. I attached 3 internal memos that showed cost-cutting decisions based on knowingly rejected designs. The third went to Zoe Warner. Zoe was the founder and managing partner of Warner Poss Kessler, one of the few women-owned architecture firms in the city, and a former client of mine from my Navy to civilian transition program. She didn't like Reagan, never had. Said once over drinks, "Your sister's the kind of executive who smiles for photo ops and screams at welders." She picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you," she said. "I need a meeting." "In person, no lawyers. You got something hot, boiling." She exhaled sharply. "My office, 45 minutes. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. Zoe was the kind of person who could smell blood in a pitch deck. I grabbed the drive, printed 5 key exhibits, and headed out. Her office was downtown top-floor corner glass. Everything modern and hard-edged, like it had been carved out of ambition. She greeted me with black coffee and zero small talk. "Show me." I laid out the paperwork on her glass desk. She scanned quickly, methodically. Every few seconds, she paused to highlight something. Her face didn't change much, but her eyes sharpened with each page. When she reached the email thread where Reagan's team casually discussed using Amber's authority to silence internal safety concerns, Zoe let out a low whistle. "Jesus, they really thought you'd roll over." "They're betting I still will," I said. She nodded, then looked up. "You want to kill the merger?" "No," I said. "I want the truth on record before they close." She smiled, slow and deliberate. "That's meaner. I'm not interested in a lawsuit yet," I added. "But I'm not going to let them rewrite history while walking over my name." Zoe leaned back. "You realize this isn't just about bad paperwork. If this goes public, you're holding the match over a $300 million deal." "I'm aware. And if they decide to throw you under the bus anyway, I'm not standing in front of it." Zoe tapped her pen on the desk, considering. "You ever worked with a structural integrity analyst?" "Yes." "Good. You'll want one on record. Get a formal assessment of the draft they use showing failure conditions. Then we take that to the city inspector. And quietly, very quietly, we bring in an investor contact I trust. Will they listen? They'll listen if they think there's liability risk, especially if they realize they've been lied to. Public image is cheap. Risk exposure isn't." I nodded. "I'll get the analyst." She pushed a card across the desk. "Start here. Smart guy. Ex-Army. Hates shortcuts." I pocketed the card. Before I stood, she added, "Amber. You should know Reagan's firm tried to poach one of my associates last year. She told them to go to hell, but they've been playing dirty. You won't get an apology from that side." "I'm not looking for one," I said. She smiled again. "Then we're aligned." I walked out of her office with a folder full of copies and action plan, and the unsettling calm that comes right before everything explodes. On the street, I called the analyst, set up a meeting. He agreed to review the design files and run his own stress simulations. Then I made one last call Miller. "Can your team meet me tomorrow morning?" I asked. "All of them." "Yes. All." He didn't ask why. "We'll be there." Because the people who had been erased in Reagan's version of the story, They deserved to hear the truth before anyone else did. Not just that they were right to be worried, but that someone was finally fighting to make it count. This was no longer about family or loyalty. This was about putting my name back where it belonged, attached to the truth, not their lies. The conference room smelled like burned coffee and wet concrete. Miller had brought in his crew straight from the docks, boots, still dusty jackets, unzipped faces, tight with the kind of focus you don't fake. I didn't stand at the head of the table. I stood off to the side, plugged my laptop into the screen, and let the data do the talking. I started with the stress simulations. No speeches, no drama, just numbers moving across a grid, wind speeds increasing load tolerances, tightening failure points, lighting up in red. You didn't have to be an engineer to understand what red meant. One of the guys whistled low when the model buckled at 72 miles per hour. "That's a bad day," Miller said. "That's a lawsuit," I said. "If you're lucky." I clicked to the next slide. The same turbine-corrected design. Reinforcement restored, red gone. Green across the board. "That's the version they didn't submit," I said. A few heads shook. Someone muttered a curse. They knew Miller said not asking. "Yes." Silence again, not confusion. Recognition. "I'm not here to tell you what to do," I said. "I'm here to tell you what your name is attached to. If anything fails, the paper trail points to me, which means it'll point to you next." One of the welders leaned forward. "So what happens if we refuse to keep building? You document everything I said. Photos, logs, emails, and you don't delete anything. If you're pressured to ignore safety, you ask for it in writing." Miller nodded. "We can do that." "Good," I said, "because people who cut corners hate paper." By noon, word was already spreading. Not loud, not public, just enough that managers started checking their phones more often, and meetings got rescheduled without explanation. When systems built on lies start feeling heat, they leak. That afternoon, the analyst Zoe recommended sent his preliminary findings. No commentary, just a report stamped with his firm's letterhead and a single line highlighted in yellow, failure probable, under sustained wind loads common to the region. Probable. Not possible. Not theoretical. Probable. That word changes conversations. I forwarded the report to the city inspector's office, along with the side-by-side comparison and the email where Reagan's team acknowledged the risk. I didn't add commentary. Inspectors don't need opinions. They need documentation. At 4:30, Reagan called. I let it ring. At 5, she called again. I answered. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded. "Protecting my license," I said. "You went behind my back. You went behind my name." She exhaled hard. "You're blowing this up for everyone." "I'm correcting the record." "This is business," she snapped. "You don't understand the pressure." "I understand pressure," I said. "I also understand failure modes." She laughed sharp and brittle. "You think inspectors care? You think investors read reports?" "Yes," I said. "When there's liability." She went quiet. "You sent it," she said. "I did." Her voice dropped. "If this merger stalls, people lose jobs. People lose jobs when turbines fail too," I said. "Usually faster." "You're enjoying this," she said. "No," I said. "I'm finished enabling it." She hung up. At 6, Callie Bryant emailed, subject line question, regarding Whitaker Renewables permits. She didn't ask much, just wanted to verify timelines and names. She attached a screenshot from a public database showing my license number on 2 separate projects. I replied with facts only. Dates. Documents. No adjectives. By evening, the city inspector acknowledged receipt. Formal language. Neutral tone. But the last line mattered. "We will be conducting a compliance review effective immediately." I closed the laptop and leaned back. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my dad. "Your mother's upset," he said. "I know. She thinks you're trying to punish your sister. I'm trying to stop her." He sighed. You always did take responsibility for things that weren't yours. This one is, I said, on paper. He was quiet for a moment. She says you're sabotaging the family. The family sabotaged itself, I said. I just stopped holding it together. After we hung up, I drove past the riverfront site. Fences up. Cranes frozen midair. A temporary stop work notice taped crookedly to the gate. It wasn't dramatic. No sirens, no crowds. Just machinery standing still because someone finally asked the right questions. That night, Reagan posted again. Another polished update. Minor regulatory review underway. All projects proceeding as planned. The comments were still supportive. For now. But the calls started coming in after that. Lawyers, compliance officers, an investor's assistant asking for clarification on engineering discrepancies. The lie was starting to cost money. And money makes people honest in ways morality never does. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. The way you do when a structure finally stops swaying because the weak supports have been removed. I shut down my phone, set it face down on the table, and started organizing the next batch of files. By the time I arrived at Zoe's office the next morning, she already had the news up on her screen. A sidebar on a local business site showed the headline, City halts wind project pending safety review. Whitaker Renewables silent. Zoe didn't look surprised. They went dark overnight, she said. No press, no updates, just a generic holding statement. They don't have anything else, I said. They never planned for someone pushing back. She slid a folder across the table. That's your analyst's report. It's already been shared with the review board and 2 law firms. I opened it. This version was thicker, more detailed charts, load models, simulations. Page 12 had a projected failure window of 18 to 30 months under regional weather conditions. No room for debate. Zoe leaned forward. This is officially a liability event now. Every investor who's seen this will start auditing the other numbers. They'll find more, I said. They always do, she replied. I stood by the window for a moment, watching the traffic crawl below. From up here, the city looked steady, gridlocked, but stable. From the ground, it was chaos. Zoe walked over and handed me a flash drive. That's the file we're sending to the SEC. You're really doing it. We don't play favorites, she said. And I don't like being lied to by someone who signs my name to their mistakes. She wasn't just helping me out of loyalty. She was protecting her firm. And I respected that. Back downstairs, I turned on my phone. 4 missed calls from Reagan. 1 voicemail from my mother. 1 from a number I didn't recognize. The unknown number was a reporter. Voicemail transcript. Ms. Whitaker, this is Cameron Donnelly with the Chicago Tribune. We're hearing conflicting reports about your involvement in the Whitaker Renewables project. Would love to clarify with you directly. I didn't delete it. I didn't call back either. This wasn't about the press. Not yet. Outside, the wind had picked up. It carried the cold off the lake in a way that made you feel the metal in your bones. I drove out to the original job site, Reagan's flagship project, the one we saved 3 years ago. The one that almost tanked the whole company before I came back from deployment and reworked the foundation. The new foreman recognized me as I got out of the truck. Didn't think we'd see you back here, he said. I'm just checking something. He waved me through. Be careful. The site's locked up, but someone might still be cleaning records. That didn't surprise me. Damage control usually includes quiet deletions. Inside the main trailer, I pulled up the backup logs I used to access years ago. The old login still worked. Reagan never bothered with full deauthorization protocols. And there it was, a private project folder labeled Archive, Revision History Do Not Delete. Buried inside were photos, dozens of them. Me on site, hard hat, clipboard, covered in dust and doing the math no one else would touch. A few were from security cameras, others clearly taken by someone documenting work for insurance. None of them had ever been published, because they didn't fit Reagan's version of the story. These weren't just images, they were timestamps, proof. I copied them to my encrypted drive and wiped the access trail. On my way out, I spotted the shipping manifest binder on the table. Someone had circled an entry from 18 months ago, delivery of subgrade steel listed at full price specs. I took a photo. By the time I got to my truck, my hands weren't shaking anymore. I knew what this was now. Not a misunderstanding, not a business shortcut. Fraud, real and traceable. At home, I printed the photos, the shipping record, and a fresh copy of the engineer's failure report. Then I organized the files into one single presentation. No fluff, no opinion, just the facts. It was ready. At 4:17 p.m., I got a text from Reagan. "We need to talk, now." I didn't respond. 2 hours later, my father showed up at my door. He didn't knock like he was angry. He knocked like he wasn't sure I'd open it. I let him in. He looked smaller than I remembered. He sat on the edge of my couch, held his hands together, and didn't speak for almost a full minute. Then finally, she says, "You're going to ruin everything." I stood. She already did. He nodded. "I know that, now." He looked at the report on the table, then at the photos. "I didn't know she used your name." "She didn't. She stole it." He swallowed hard. "You were always the quiet one," he said. "I think I let that become an excuse to ignore you." "That's not on you," I said. "But this part is." He looked up. "You backed her. Every time. Even when she lied, even when I brought proof. You wanted her version of success so badly, you never looked at what it was built on." He didn't defend himself. "I came here," he said, "because I'm not going to ask you to stop. I'm just asking. Is there any way to do this without burning it all down?" I pointed to the page with the failure projection. "This building falls," I said, "and someone dies. It's already burned." He nodded once. "I understand." He left without asking for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. Some things you can't rebuild with a handshake. The morning of the investor hearing, the air in downtown Chicago felt heavier than usual. Cold damp, loaded with the kind of quiet pressure that settles in right before something breaks. I walked into the municipal conference center with a black case under one arm and nothing in my hands that didn't have a timestamp. This wasn't a courtroom. It wasn't even a trial. It was something worse, a private hearing with money at stake, reputations in the room, and everyone pretending to be polite while looking for someone to blame. Reagan was already inside. So were her lawyers. She looked sleek, polished, unbothered, as if the structural integrity of a multi-million-dollar turbine network wasn't crumbling under her feet. I didn't say a word to her, didn't nod, didn't blink. I took my seat at the opposite end of the table beside Zoe, who had her laptop open and her nails tapping against the edge like a countdown clock. The panel of three sat at the front, two city officials and an independent engineer brought in for neutral evaluation. None of them looked thrilled to be there, which was good. Means they were taking it seriously. One of them, a man named McIntyre, cleared his throat. "We're here today to clarify conflicting reports regarding structural certification and engineering attribution tied to the Wind Phase 4 project," he said. "We will hear directly from Petty Officer Amber Whitaker, whose license is listed as Engineer of Record." I nodded once. Zoe connected her laptop to the projector. The lights dimmed slightly. I clicked open the first slide. No fluff, just a full schematic marked Submitted Version Draft 4. "This is the draft submitted to the City Permit Office under my name," I said. "You'll see the load-bearing data is outdated and fails under regional wind conditions." I clicked to the second slide. "Here's the corrected version I finalized. Dated, digitally signed, never submitted." I advanced again, side-by-side comparison. Then the email, "Use legacy approval to expedite. Amber won't fight us." Zoe didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I walked them through the rest of the file. The forged approvals. The manipulated shipping invoices. The fake dismissals issued under my name, and the internal communications, where Reagan's team referred to my engineering credentials as a technicality to be managed. There was no outrage, not at first, because this room wasn't built for outrage. This was a room where outrage translated to liability, and liability translated to cost. Reagan's lawyer finally spoke. "These are accusations, not confirmed violations. Miss Whitaker is clearly upset by her exclusion from the merger process. I cut him off. I don't care about the merger. I care that my license is being used to approve structures that can't withstand a common thunderstorm." McIntyre held up a hand. "Let's stick to the data. Ms. Whitaker, you claim your signature was forged. I don't claim I said. I proved it. Here's the metadata showing my signature wasn't present on that file until it was added by someone else 3 months after I'd left the company." He leaned forward. "And you have the original stored and encrypted in 2 locations, timestamped by a third-party system and backed up by a certified integrity analyst." The independent engineer on the panel, a woman named Garland, looked at Zoe. "Can we confirm these numbers?" Zoe nodded. "Already did. She's telling the truth." They went quiet again. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It didn't need to be. The impact wasn't in the shouting. It was in the way no one had anything left to say. Eventually, McIntyre turned to Reagan. "Would you like to respond?" Reagan smiled the way guilty people do when they think they're still holding the steering wheel. "There may have been some miscommunication regarding draft status and administrative approvals," she said carefully. "We stand by the integrity of the work." I almost laughed. "Your turbines don't." Zoe clicked to the simulation. It ran in silence. Wind speed increased, load stress built, and then red. Collapse, again and again. The math didn't lie. It never does. When it was over, Garland leaned forward, her voice cold and clipped. "If construction continues under this design, it won't be a business failure. It'll be a public safety violation. And when it fails, no PR campaign will cover it up." That was it. The moment the room changed. Reagan's eyes didn't move. Her lips twitched just slightly, but her posture cracked shoulders, sinking hands, folding tighter throat stiff. She knew. The panel thanked us and called a recess. I packed up slowly, deliberately. Reagan didn't speak to me, didn't look my way. For the first time in years, she had no words. Outside, the wind hit my face like cold steel. Zoe walked beside me. "You know what they're going to do now," she said. "Scramble, yank funding, pull staff, rebrand it into something else." "Doesn't matter," I said. "The truth's out." Zoe smiled. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one they tried to ignore. We stopped at the sidewalk. She looked at me. "You ready for what happens next?" I nodded once. I didn't come this far to fold. That night back home, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee and no phone in reach. The city lights blinked steady, and the noise below felt distant, manageable. For once, I didn't feel like I was carrying something alone. The lie didn't collapse in one day, but the silence did. And now they had to live in the world they built without the foundation I used to hold up for free. I didn't go to the press conference. I didn't need to. Reagan's firm sent out a carefully worded statement through a PR agency that probably charged 5 figures for every syllable. Leadership transition. Technical review, realigning, project scope. Not once did it say fraud or forgery, but anyone who knew how to read between the lines could see the cracks showing. The city issued a temporary suspension of all permits associated with Whitaker Renewables, pending further investigation. Investors began pulling their commitments. One of their primary suppliers posted a public notice demanding overdue payments. The machine started eating itself quietly, without flames, just wires unraveling under the weight of pressure it was never built to carry. I watched it all from my desk in the new office corner window, real steel beams, no cosmetic drywall pretending to hold anything up. Zoe had cleared a space for me the same week the panel report went public. "Partner," the plaque said. Not junior, not in title only, just a name and a rank I'd earned without needing to steal anyone else's. My first project was already underway, a redesign of the same riverfront site I had once rescued. This time, with my name on every drawing, every safety spec, every stress simulation. We weren't cutting corners. We were setting standards. When the licensing board officially cleared my name, I didn't throw a party. I just framed the letter and nailed it to the wall right beside the flag I kept folded from my last deployment. Zoe stepped into my office that afternoon with a mug of coffee and a folder thick with zoning approvals. "You good?" she asked. "Better than I've been in a long time." She sat on the edge of the desk. "Reagan's been removed from board oversight. They're saying it was voluntary. Of course they are. She'll never work in the city again, not in anything structural." I nodded. "That's not my problem anymore." Zoe studied me for a second, then smiled. "You're not angry." "I was," I said. "But anger's a short-term fuel. Doesn't get you very far unless you use it to build something." "And what are you building?" I looked past her, out the window, toward the site where the new turbines would rise stronger, safer, honest. Something that doesn't fall when the wind hits. Zoe raised her mug like a toast. To structural integrity, I raised mine back. To calling it what it is. 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name scrawled in rushed cursive. It was from my mother. No apology, not exactly. Just 5 paragraphs of soft denial and vague concern how things got complicated, how intentions were good, how family ties matter. I read it once, then again. Then I folded it, tucked it in a drawer, and didn't answer. Because here's the thing, no one tells you about betrayal. You don't always get justice by fighting. Sometimes you get it by walking away and watching the weight fall exactly where it was supposed to. They weren't punished. They weren't humiliated. They were simply left with what they built without me holding it upright. I didn't need revenge. I had truth. I had peace. And I had the one thing they tried to erase from every blueprint. They stole my name written in ink, backed by facts, and impossible to crop out. Later that week, I went back to the old construction yard, the one where I used to keep my tools work through the night, and fix the messes Reagan never even noticed. It was empty now, cleared. Just dirt, some fencing, and a single shipping container rusting in the corner. I walked up to it, opened the door, and stepped inside. My old hard hat was still there, hanging on a hook. Covered in dust. Cracked at the brim, I held it in my hands for a while. Not nostalgic, just grounded. That helmet had seen more truth than any Gala photo ever could. It had protected my head through storms and steel drops and lies that weighed more than concrete. It was scratched, battered, and absolutely mine. I didn't take it with me. I left it there right where it belonged. A relic of who I used to be, not who I had to become. Outside, the sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across buildings still standing, only because people like me once held the weight. But not anymore. Now I was done holding things for people who never earned the support. I wasn't their pillar. I wasn't their scapegoat. I was the engineer and the architect of the truth, of my life, of everything they never thought I'd survive building without them. If you've ever been the quiet one in a family full of noise, if you've ever held things together while someone else took the credit, or if you're just here for powerful family revenge stories with a side of military grit and justice, then this channel is for you. Go ahead, subscribe now. You don't want to miss what we build next.